I understand that you are a deep fake AI, but hey, no one acknowledges that you're real. You're in the chat right now and you're not even a real human.
I know this steak doesn't exist. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
There is zero contemporaneous evidence of Jesus being a real person. What? Are you kidding me? There's plenty of evidence. What are you talking about? The secular scholars, not the Christian scholars, the secular scholars all acknowledge that he was a real human. So, I mean, I understand that you are a deep fake AI, but hey, no one acknowledges that you're real. You're in the chat right now and you're not even a real human. You don't exist. MJA, you don't exist. You're not really here.
A few moments later.
How you doing?
It's been a while. How's it going?
Oh, have we spoken before?
Yes, we spoke on Adam and Eve.
Okay. What's up, man?
Not much. I'm not disagreeing with you on here, so checking out how you doing and stuff.
Oh, you a follower in Jesus Christ?
Yes, sir.
All right, bro. Let's go fishing. What's up?
Hey, good afternoon.
What's up, MJ?
I figured since I was AI, a deepfake AI, would come on and talk to you.
Okay.
So my
That's gonna be interesting.
my position that there's no contemporaneous evidence of Jesus being a real person. So 4 Gospels tell the story of Jesus' life. We know through studies done in the 90s at Stanford, there were probably 2 authors of those 4 books. They were all written sometime between 60 to 80 years after Christ would have died. So they were not firsthand accounts. They were probably retellings of stories that people had heard. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, we have the nativity story, which has Joseph and Mary traveling to Bethlehem because of a census from Caesar Augustus. We have records from the Romans. There was no census done in a time period that would correlate to when Christ would have been born. Even when they did a census, even those of the Jewish people, you were not required to travel to the town of your family's ancestry. Joseph, being a descendant of David, would have had to go to Bethlehem. In Matthew, we have the story of the Magi encountering Herod and telling him of the birth of this king, and Herod then ordering the wipeout of all the firstborn males in the area. Therefore, Joseph and Mary travel to Egypt to flee that. We do not get that story in the other telling of the Nativity. Outside of that, there is no writings by anyone, Herod, there are no writings by Pilate or any other individuals about Christ during the time in which he was alive. The first writings we have are the Gospels, which again are after him. The only person outside of writings in the Bible that has talked about Jesus was a Jewish historian about 100 years after Christ would have died, who refers to him and does talk about him being a rebellious rabbi, but does not talk of any of the mystical features of Christ. And then beyond that in the Bible, once you get away from the Gospels, you have the remainder of the New Testament written by Paul, or previously Saul, before Christ appeared to him on the road when he was a Roman soldier. There are no more references to Jesus being a real person after the Gospels. In fact, Paul/Saul did not even know that Christ was supposed to be a real person. He thought it was just a deity who had appeared to him. I'm fine with people arguing back and forth about, is there a God, is there not a God? You can't really prove or disprove those things. I mean, faith is faith. But when your God takes the form of a human, now we have a historical responsibility to prove this person exists. And it frankly just doesn't. In addition to that, the story of Christ is not even an original story. If you look to something as simple as the Book of the Dead from Egypt, which predates Christ by about 2,000 years, you get the story of Horus, the sun god, who was prophesied to be born, was born of a virgin, was baptized, had 12 followers, raised somebody from the dead. If you translate that person's name from ancient Egyptian to Aramaic, it translates as Lazarus. He was put to death, he rose from the dead. It's also the same story as 23 other demigods from the Mediterranean area, all of which predate Christ. There is no contemporaneous historical evidence of him existing.
Let me just stop you real quick because I haven't...
Appreciate you letting me talk, though. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I haven't dug in deep enough to corroborate with the last claim that you just made.
Of Horus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About all the specifics of that. because I've heard an argument about the Red Sea being a plagiarism from a Book of the Dead story. And when I did my research into that, it was just absolute horseshit, and it's not even close. So the fact that you're bringing up like really specific names like Lazarus and 12 disciples and things like that regarding the story of Seth, Horus, and Osiris, I have to do my research into that to really corroborate if that's true. But I will say that I have a lot of reservations because everything that you've said prior to that was just nothing but a bunch of half-truths.
Like what?
And half-truths are cool. I mean, it's not like I don't just completely invalidate what you're saying, but half-truths, 9 parts truth and 1 part false in a true or false statement is still false.
Okay. What, not being rude, but by all means, please, what did I say that you feel or you think?
Let's just start with one. Let's just start with one.
Okay.
You said that there's no account of Pilate and Herod, right?
No. I said neither of them mentioned Christ. We know they were real people. We have writings of theirs. We have records of them.
I've got their actual letters.
Okay.
I've got the actual letter that Pontius Pilate wrote to Tiberius Caesar.
Okay.
I also have the letter of Herod and his son that were writing about the instance of what's going on during this time in history. So aside from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you trying to invalidate it and saying that it were secondhand accounts, when the earliest, it's dated between 40 to 90 AD, and Jesus was crucified in 30 AD, that's only 10 to 50 years after Jesus was crucified, dead, and resurrected.
Sure.
And then you got to think about how people write autobiographies. People don't write autobiographies in their 30s. They write their autobiographies in their 70s and, you know, when they're older.
No, I agree.
So you've got John, the Apostle John, which was like, he was 19 or so when Jesus started his ministry. So he was 10 or so years younger than Jesus. So not only do you have that to really account for, but you've got the Gospel of John being dated between 40 AD, and then you've got the Book of Revelation being dated around 90 AD. So that right there is erroneous. And then you said about Pilate. So you talked about a historian, and you said that the only historian was like 100 years after. And I think you're probably referring to Tacitus, but Tacitus was about 50 years after Jesus. But aside from that, Tacitus and Priscus are 2 historians that talk about Jesus and specifically quote an individual, another historian that predates them, that was alive during the time of Jesus. In fact, he was 19 years old when Jesus was born. So that would have put Vallius Paterculus in his late 50s when Jesus was crucified. And on top of that, we know through these writings that were archived by the Vatican that Vallius Paterculus returned back to Rome in 31 AD. Now, it is my contention that Jesus was crucified in 30 AD. So there's that. But then I can talk about what Vallius Paterculus actually says. He says that in Judea, he met a man called Jesus of Nazareth, who was one of the most remarkable characters he had ever seen, that he was more afraid of Jesus than a whole army, for he cured all manner of diseases and raised the dead. And when he cursed the orchards or fruit trees for their barrenness, they instantly withered to their roots. After referring to their wonderful works of Jesus, he says that although Jesus had such power, he did not use it to injure anyone, but seemed always inclined to help the poor. Vallius says the Jews were divided in their opinion of him, the poor class claiming him as their king and their deliverer from the Roman authority, and that if Jesus should raise an army and give it the power, he could sweep the world in a single day. But the rich Jews hated and cursed him behind his back and called him an Egyptian necromancer, which would go back to the other point where you're saying, well, there's no account of Jesus being in Egypt. Well, the freaking Jewish Pharisees called him an Egyptian necromancer and said that he was healing all of these people from the sorcery that he learned in Egypt. So it was pretty common knowledge that Jesus was in Egypt at some point in his time 2,000 years ago. Now we're in 2024, so I can understand why you would just be so quick to invalidate because you're so confident in the very limited information that you've researched. But let me continue. But the rich Jews hated and cursed him behind his back and called him an Egyptian necromancer, though they were as afraid of him as of death. Vallius Paterculus, B72, found in the Vatican at Rome. So if you've ever written a paper in university, you've got to reference your paper, you got to cite your sources. So this is a actual cited sources that was archived by the Vatican Library. And the whole reason why they probably didn't publish this stuff was because they didn't even want anyone reading the Bible. They were unaliving people for reading the Bible and translating the Bible. So you can understand why this was never published by the Vatican itself, but it was smuggled out by a German dude and sent to some dude in America. And then that dude was sued by the Mormon church and accused of a forgery because the Mormons were completely against this because it would debunk everything that their whole entire religion is about. But you don't know any of this stuff because you really just scratched the surface and you're okay with where you are.
Do we have a deal?
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. The Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Real fast, I'll let you guys go because I know other people want to get on. The 2 points I was making with the authorship of the Gospels.
He didn't hear a damn thing that I said.
You gotta come out of love, bro.
You know, no pearls to swine. No pearls to swine.